Hello and welcome to 1 Week, 1 Year. It's a podcast where we normally, every week, quote unquote, watch a year of movies. One episode, 1 year is what we
Yeah,
should call it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
this episode is not that. This episode is where we're having a good old time. We're talking about the last 10 years of movies, the 1910s. 1910s in
Indeed.
review. I am one of your hosts, Chris Ellie. I am a projectionist at the Denver Film Society. And standing to my left on my Zoom window is.
I'm Glenn Covell. I'm the other co-host, and I am a filmmaker at my house.
Yes, including you're doing editing stuff at your house too.
True, I
D-
do everything from my house now.
the WFH life.
Yeah, exactly.
So Glenn, good to talk to you.
Yeah,
Good to see you again. Glad we're getting back into this, getting back on our roll. I changed my angle. What do you think?
it looks nice. You can really see your very impressive collection of Blu-rays and
And video
film
games.
film stuff, video games, all those goodies, VHS tapes,
There are some tapes
um,
in there.
color map thing from I forget what movie that's from, but
It's 2001.
it is 2001. I thought it was, but I didn't want to say if I was wrong. Yeah, it's nice to be doing this. Nice to and review the things that we watched months and months and months ago.
Yes, getting close to years ago, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
But I think that now that our lives are a bit, or that my life is a little bit more stable, and I'm on top of my shit a little more, then we can get going again. But how's it going? How are you doing?
Pretty good, just trucking along.
I just finished running the Denver Film Festival as tech lead at the C Film Center.
I'm applauding, but I'm doing it really quietly so it doesn't mess up the audio.
Yeah, that would be bad. I've only worked at a film festival. I have not kind of run a department and everything like that. I was involved in all of these planning meetings that I didn't really have too much to do with. But it was great. It was awesome, and the other projectionists killed it, and it was a super smooth show.
Great.
No canceled anything. Apparently, that has happened at least once or twice. Shows have gotten messed up in previous years. So, yay, good stuff. It was very busy, but it was a fun time.
Awesome. I did not get in, but I'm glad that it went well.
I'm sorry I couldn't nepotism you into there.
No, I don't want I don't want charity. I would have loved a good excuse to fly back to Denver to go to that. But since I wasn't invited, I didn't do that.
It's okay. You're in the shorts program in my heart. And
There you go. Where it matters.
yeah, something that I'm working on making happen is having shorts screen before features at our theater. It's something that I really want to try and do. So I'll hit you up if
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
if that ends up happening. Anyway, we're here to talk about the 1910s and talk about the movies we watched from the 1910s, and then we also watched a couple of movies about the 1910s, specifically the film industry.
Yeah. Which is not, I feel like, not a super heavily covered period of time in film history in terms of its portrayal in other movies.
I mean, it's not covered in other movies so much, but it's also at least as far as film history, people don't really talk about it that much.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that I think it's a little less thrilling than the 19aughts, and maybe a little less masterful than the 1920s. So it seems like a lot of stuff that people talk about silent film wise is Edison and Méliès, and then they skip to Metropolis or something like
Which,
that.
I mean, it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it's there's so much good stuff here and so many interesting developments and things like that. I mean, this is the reason we're doing this show, right? Is to,
you're watching
do it year by year.
Yeah, you're watching people collectively develop the language for feature film, which is the thing that we saw develop in this last decade. The earliest feature films were before this, but just barely.
Mm-hmm.
And what we saw was people kind of stumbling to make the feature film a really concise and well paced thing. And I think that like as we got toward the end of the decade, we saw a lot of feature films that used their time really well, that were cut in really engaging ways, in ways that you would consider to be more modern, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just more entertaining. They kind of figured out that like, oh yeah, like things don't always have to take place in real time.
Yeah,
We can maybe cut some of the, you know, some of the fluff out of here and just kind of, and it kind of control pacing and that kind of thing too. It's really interesting to see that stuff.
yeah. Do you have any other thoughts
develop.
on the decade itself before we get into it?
Um, yeah, interesting. I mean, yeah, I think it a lot of my thoughts about it are things about how like it is this kind of weird transitional period of time between like film being invented and kind of the explosion of like creativity around that, and then this is sort of where a lot of the maybe less sort of glamorous development happens, of just like kind of meat and potatoes, like how do we actually tell stories in this medium. And then I think the 20s is going to be the like, oh okay, now they have like, they're really starting to figure it out now. And then right at the end of that they're like, oh wait, we're doing sound now, oh shit, now we don't know how to do anything anymore. So it'll be interesting to see that happen too.
I wonder, right? Like, is adjusting to something that's like formally different, like the from 30-second movies to 5-minute movies, from 5-minute movies to 15, and from 15 to feature length. Like, these are things where people had to like experiment with what formally worked
Mm-hmm.
as far as like editing and that kind of thing. And I wonder like how once we get into talkies at the beginning of or at the end of this next decade, uh how much of that will seem kind of natural, like, oh, you put talking in,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
talk, right? Or like I wonder if people will stumble with that as well, I'm not sure.
Mm.
I haven't really ever seen any movies from like the late 20s, I guess.
I've seen a couple. I mean, yeah, I've seen like Hell's Angels, which is the Howard Hughes movie that he, I guess, sort of infamously like halfway through was like, we're doing sound now. We're gonna redo a bunch of stuff. Um so yeah, I've like read or heard stories about sort of the early kind of growing pains of early sound films, but I haven't seen a lot of like of movies between like 1927 and like 19 like early 30s, like 32, 33. So that'll be interesting to see, but we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
We got time.
We're talking about what we already did, not talking about what we're about to do.
Exactly. I don't know, should we go, do you want to start with the movies that we watched for this episode, or should we go through our top 10?
Let's start with the movies, but first, before I forget again, because I've meant to break this out a couple times, and this is just for the video viewers here, I've got this Francis Ford Coppola director's cut wine that I thought I would take out for this occasion. I was at the liquor store and I saw Francis Ford Coppola's name and I was like, whoa, what? And then I realized that it's an extremely normal and known thing that he makes wine, but I was gobsmacked. But it's pretty cool. If you're listening to the podcast, sorry, but if you're on YouTube, it's got like a zoetrope kind of thing written, scrolling all the way across the bottle.
An American zoetrope, you might even say.
An American zoetrope?
It's the name of his production company.
Oh, I didn't know that. It says, this graphic band is a replica of a 19th century original used in a device called a zoetrope, which produced the illusion of a moving picture from static ones. This signature Sonoma wine pays homage to the history of filmmaking and to the uncompromising standards necessary to make great films and great wine. So we can kind of cut around this as I open this up, but
I'm jealous now. I wish I had remembered that you were gonna do this, and I had gone out and bought my own bottle of Coppola wine. But
We should make it a tradition for every wrap up episode.
Yeah, we get a nice bottle of Coppola wine with some film history written on the label.
We'll get a couple of bottles.
Yeah. Oh man, no way that no one's made that joke before. So satisfying.
All right, now that I'm a little liquored up, why don't we talk about one of our movies? Is there anyone that you feel an urge to talk about most dearly?
I guess there's the one that we both watched today. Maybe we should start with that one,
Sure.
Since it's probably freshest
It's nice
in our
and
memories.
fresh. I love to watch movies for this podcast fresh, as in cram them in right before we record.
So the opposite of what I do, which is I watch them immediately after recording, and then I wait and forget things about them.
Oh boy. Yeah, so let's talk about Pearl. The newest by far movie that we have ever spoken of.
Yeah, I mean, several months old.
Yeah.
We're actually trying to be topical, I guess, in this case, of like a movie that other people have seen.
Yeah, right? I mean, well, people have seen A Birth of a Nation, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
well, we'll see if it's on anybody's top 10.
Yeah, I don't know. Slight spoilers for later in this episode. Didn't make the list.
Yeah, Pearl. I thought it was really, really good.
Me too.
I have not. Have you seen X?
No, I have not.
The only other Ty West movie I've seen is House of the Devil, which
Same.
shares a name with a Méliès movie.
True. Yeah. Really tying it together now.
Yeah, right?
So wait, so you did not see X either?
No, I meant to.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Our theater was doing some screenings of X. Well, we played X when it came out like earlier this year in like March or something like that. And we did some repeat screenings of X when Pearl came out, and I meant to but did not. And I meant to see Pearl in theaters, but I did not.
Yeah, I mean, I meant to see Pearl this past week. It was screening at the Roxy Hotel Cinema on 35mm, and I got on the train platform to go see it, and then it was like the next train is in like 40 minutes, and I was like, well, sorry Ty, but I'm not waiting 40 minutes for the train because it was already like 10:30 at night. So I was like, yeah, so thanks MTA. You ruined it. But I watched it today and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. I don't know like how much we want to like we feel like we need to like tie it in, you know, if we just talk about Pearl or if we're like it involves old movies.
It just I mean, by its very nature, I think it ties into a lot of things that we've talked about on the show, and it is like about a very specific period of time.
1918.
I think it was funny that this was made during a pandemic, and it reflects the previous one from 100 years ago.
Certainly intentional.
100%, yeah. But it was like, I think this is one of the only movies that is like a movie made during the current pandemic that is like partially about that doesn't feel insufferable.
Right.
Where it feels like a natural, it just feels like a natural thing that it's like.
Yeah.
This movie I also don't think, if I hadn't known that it was made, you know, like however many months ago, like a year ago, I don't think I necessarily would have guessed that it was like, you know, made in the manner that it was.
Right, but it's also like it's also a movie that like if you tell me it's a pandemic movie, it kind of makes sense in a way because it's like a small number of scenes or sets, I guess.
Yeah.
And it does have people wearing masks in it and stuff.
Yeah, but it ties in great because it's at 1918. And yeah, it's like not a huge cast, very limited sort of number of locations. But it never feels sort of constrained by that, I didn't think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I think it's like a really tight movie. It's I thought that the character work in it was like fantastic.
So I guess we should describe a bit for people who don't know. Pearl is a movie that came out this year, directed by Ty West, written by Ty West and Mia Goth, who plays the lead character, the titular character in Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's set in 1918 on a farm in Texas, and it's about a young woman named Pearl who is obsessed with the pictures and wants to be a star.
Yeah.
And things do not go well.
It's a horror film.
It is. Although there horrific things happen in it, but I think it doesn't necessarily. It goes for quality over quantity. There's not like not a lot of like kills or gore in this movie. When they happen, it's like, oh boy, here we go.
I honestly like I am really interested to see X now. Now that I've watched its prequel, because like X seems like, I guess X is made, so Pearl is made in the model of these kind of classic Technicolor movies, which is not quite the era that it is set in, but it's sort of meant to look like Wizard of Oz and all this other kind of stuff. And
it has a very Technicolor kind of old-fashioned, much more of a kind of like, not even, it reminded me more in terms of its visual style of like films from like the late 50s. Because it's also shot anamorphic, so it's widescreen, it's like very colorful, very saturated, very bright.
And I guess X is meant to be this kind of like grungier, like Texas Chainsaw kind of pastiche. So
I heard an interesting thing in reading about Pearl today of how, so this was shot back to back with X. At the same time. There's kind of a funny quote from Ty West about that, which is so this was made during like the height of COVID pandemic stuff, where it was like it was very difficult to shoot anything. And so this movie, even though it takes place entirely on a farm in Texas that X also takes place on. It was shot entirely in New Zealand, which is not close to Texas, because New Zealand was one of the only countries that had any sort of film production happening.
Wow.
Because they were so isolated and locked off, they could sort of like quarantine people there.
New Zealand was doing really well with the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah, but because of that, a lot of crew people from Avatar 2 worked on these movies because they were on break from between Avatar movies, and they were there in New Zealand, so Ty West was able to bring them over.
Did they film a lot of Avatar 2 in New Zealand?
Yeah, they shot all of it in New Zealand, I'm pretty sure.
Oh.
Possibly New Zealand and Australia, but
I wonder if we'll see any hobbits show up in the
maybe,
what's
who
it
can
called?
say?
Way of the Water or something?
The Way of Water, yeah. I'm very excited for Avatar 2. I don't know about anyone else. I think I'm just excited to look James Cameron doing water stuff. It's possible there's a serpentine dance in the movie. Who's to say? But I think this movie wasn't even initially planned. The quote from Ty West is, "We're already building all this stuff. It's COVID, and we're in the one place on Earth where it's safe to make a movie. We have the whole crew from Avatar 2 who's on break. We should make 2 movies." And they did. And I love that
awesome.
mentality. I love that he was like, we're all here already. Like, let's just make another movie while we're here.
I honestly, like, I'm sure X is good, and I'm very interested to see it, but I can't imagine that it's better than this movie, because I thought this movie was like fantastic.
It did also kind of take me by surprise at how good it was. Not that I was like expecting it to be bad, but I think just I don't know, it was less pastiche and kind of more and less kind of lurid, I guess, than I was maybe expecting it to be.
Yeah, it was like a really just like disturbing character drama. Which is wild that it was just like written like really quick and then shot like oh yeah, let's shoot it now, you know?
Yeah, but that's like I love when that type of thing happens, when it's just like, I have an idea, let's go outside and do it right now.
Jazz. It's
yeah. Hey, I'm sure Damien Chazelle would agree with you there. I'm sure he'd be like, it's so much like jazz. Everything in life is just jazz.
Damien Chazelle, noted lover of old cinema.
Indeed.
Which...
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe we'll watch it for uh the next decade's thing, but there is, I think, a lot of notable stuff in his new movie Babylon, which I got to see early,
because Glenn's a fancy New York City boy.
because I'm a special boy. But you haven't seen that, so I won't talk. But I guess in relation to like what makes it so relevant to like why we watched it for the podcast is like, I guess Pearl is obsessed with like show business, and that is reflective, I think, of like the mentality of sort of like fame and stardom that was sort of shifting during the 1910s. Like movie stars weren't really a thing until the 1910s, and then all of a sudden they were, and people were like intensely, I mean they still are, but like people were so intensely like obsessed and in love with people they saw on screen.
Which we see represented in, getting ahead of myself a little bit, but we see that represented in one of the other movies that we watched, Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And that was also funny seeing sort of like the corollaries between this and Nickelodeon of like, they are both about a very similar time in history of sort of like filmmaking going from being, I guess, a slightly more of a niche thing to being this like incredibly populist thing that like, you know, you couldn't go to see the opera if you were just an average person living in the 1910s, but like most people could go to a Nickelodeon and pay a nickel and see a bunch of shorts.
They'll pay a nickel, they'll sit in that Odeon, and they'll watch a Mary Pickford.
There you go. And so I thought that was like one thing about setting this movie in 1918 that felt very smart, that it uses the like very specific period of time in history to sort of underline a lot of the things it's trying to say.
Yeah, and I loved like the depiction of the movie theater in this movie. As a projectionist, I hope that I'm not as like skeezy as the guy, the projectionist in this movie. But you know, once I saw that it was like set in 1918 and there's a projectionist in it, I was like, okay, we gotta watch this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You're saying you don't like hang out at the back door of the movie theater and be like, "Hey, lady, you want to see a projection room?"
I mean, I am willing to show anybody the projection room if they're curious, and I have snipped off little bits of junk film, but I've snipped off little bits of film to give to people who have had their eyes wide about showbiz, Hollywood, you know.
I do think it's funny how it does almost seem like a cliche of like filmmakers portraying the experience of going to the movies as this like magical thing, and like the projector beam is shining behind their head and their eyes are wide, and it's like, I have felt that way in a movie theater. Sometimes it is very like transcendently joyous experience. But I like how this movie, and I feel like a lot of movies that I've watched, I feel like there have been a lot of movies that have been released in the past year that are sort of about the experience of going to the movies. Probably because that experience didn't exist for like a year and change.
It gave people time to re-examine what it was, maybe.
And I like how this movie sort of like shows that, but it has this sort of like dark edge to it of like, yeah, it's great, but also, you know, some people might take it a little too far.
Right, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a kind of classic Hollywood story for somebody to be ruined by their dreams of Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
But I think that like this is interesting, and that, you know, kind of spoilers for the movie. We don't really usually talk about that, but this is a pretty new movie, so light spoilers, I guess, in that, like, you know, she does not get to Hollywood. Like it's all in this one small town, and she is just looking at what's on screen and dreaming about what there could be, what Hollywood means, and her viewpoint, her like lens into this world is this kind of skis-ball projectionist, you know? He like sells her on this dream, and Pearl in the movie is someone who needs the escapism of Hollywood, and she like really is like succumbs to this false image in a way, but it's so false that she hasn't even seen a glimmer of it. She just watches the movies and wants to be in them, and thinks that like a kind of within one, a Texan dancing routine that it travels around
Yeah.
the state is going to be like her ticket into Hollywood.
Which I mean is like a lot of that did happen to be like some people were just sort of like plucked out of obscurity and now they're like they're in the pictures now.
Yeah.
Everyone sees their face. And that is I think a very like the fact that is not like the few people that did get famous early on were often people who, they weren't coming from necessarily the theater or their places. They were sort of like overnight success, So
Right.
it's like the I think that adds even more to that thing of just like, oh, that could be me. I could be up there. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of great character stuff.
She is
like,
amazing in this movie, Mia
yeah.
Goth.
Mia Goth is in like every frame of this thing pretty much and co-wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Mia Goth, who has a name for horror movies, and as far as I know, hasn't really worked outside of horror a lot. I think the only other things I've seen her in have all been horror movies. But hey, she's very good at it. So
yeah,
keep knocking it out of the park.
But I don't think this is just a good like horror performance. Like that. There's like a monologue toward the end of the movie that is like, oh, this is like best actress stuff,
So that I love that monologue a lot. Like it is a great piece of acting, but the one thing that I thought of during it that I think is one thing that really kind of like made it stand out to me is, so she has a monologue where she's sitting at a table talking to her sister-in-law, and her sister-in-law is like, Pearl is very upset at this point. She's done a lot of very terrible things, and her sister-in-law is there, and she's like, hey, just you can talk to me, you can tell me anything, like I'm here, I'm supporting you, like and I feel like that this scene is what both people, if you've ever been in that situation on either end of it, I feel like this is what both people are always afraid will happen, which is when someone says, you can talk to me, you can open up, your immediate thing is like, well, what if I do and then you don't like what you hear,
Yeah.
And I think that's also when you say that to someone else that's sort of like, tell me anything, you're like, uh-oh, but like, are they going to say something that is like not good? And that's what happens in this scene. And it's just sort of like, this is like worst case scenario of someone opening up to another person where that other person does not accept them, does not listen to them, is terrified by what they hear. And then it doesn't go well from there. But yeah, I love that scene. One particular, like most of the monologue is done in a single unbroken take, which is like, I don't care if it's gimmicky to do that. It works well, okay? Like sometimes it's better just to
it's a showcase for for like a really amazing performance. I mean, I noticed that the camera wasn't cutting, but like I don't know, it would have felt like I mean it let me see how impressive what she was doing.
Yeah, it's very unobtrusive filmmaking. It's just sort of like, here you go.
Yeah. Well, it also like increased the tension too, because you're not like seeing the response.
Yeah, because cutting relieves tension, so that also it lets that build throughout. There's another movie from this year that is also a sort of unconventional horror movie called Resurrection, in which Rebecca Hall also has a like long, unbroken single take monologue that I believe is longer than this one. That one's like really, really long. And it's also just this like incredible tour de force piece of acting that you're just like, Jesus, like what did I just watch? That movie's really good if you haven't seen it. If anyone listening likes upsetting movies, watch Resurrection. That'll get you.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's very good. Yeah, it was a small release this year, but I'm championing it now. There's a lot of great details, I think, about the way that like Pearl interacts with the world around her. She is most of her clothes are hand-me-downs from her German immigrant parents, and so I feel like even though it's a period film, it takes place a long time ago, it's like her clothes definitely stand out still as like old-fashioned compared to most of the other people in the movie. There's a lot of Wizard of Oz stuff in this movie, and I'm not entirely sure what the overall like symbolism of that was, but I definitely picked up on a lot of like Wizard of Oz stuff. I feel like at various points Pearl is sort of compared visually to both Dorothy and the Wicked Witch, which is kind of interesting.
Huh.
There's a scarecrow, there's an axe, which I guess is like the Tin Man's signature weapon.
Ah, signature weapon.
I forget when Wizard of Oz was written, but there was an adaptation of it in the 1910s that we watched. There's all the animals on the farm are named after sort of era appropriate actors.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't catch all of them, but
yeah, including an alligator that isn't really a farm animal, but it's there.
An alligator named Theta for Theta Barra, and there's a cow named Mary for, I assume, Mary Pickford.
There's a great line during that monologue where Pearl says, "Life terrifies me," and I was like, "Oh, that's a good line." Big mood. One of the actors in this I met one time. I don't know if this is necessarily, this isn't really a good story, but it's notable that a friend of mine worked on a film with Matthew Sunderland, who plays Pearl's dad in this movie. Anyway, Matthew Sunderland is a New Zealand actor. Makes sense why he would be in this movie.
Oh, okay. But, and since he's from New Zealand and he's got a New Zealand accent, I guess he doesn't have to speak.
I mean, he could probably do a Texan accent, but I don't know. Shout out to Matthew Sunderland. I don't know, any other shot on film. It looks great.
Yeah, I mean,
good movie.
A lot of just film details in it, projector details. I thought the projectionist threading up the projector was kind of well done. Although it was very strange to me that there was music that seemed almost synchronized, that was being played with the movies that they were watching on screen. I wasn't like,
you start the record and you start the projector roughly the same time.
Maybe that's what was happening. Yeah, but like there was another thing that had like I don't know, like music that was like, yeah, I guess it would have been on a record if that's what they were doing. They were playing a record and then had dancing that was roughly synchronized to it, which on the screen.
Might be a bit of artistic license of just like,
it felt
the music
more like
is less janky than it would maybe have in real life.
One guy on a piano. Like it visually and maybe just historically, it was kind of mixing a bit of like 1930s 1940s with 1918. Like it was very much like set in 1918, but there were a couple of details like the Technicolor and the maybe the way that the films were presented in the movie that felt a little newer than that.
Yeah, the Stag film that the Skeezy projectionist shows is a real film from around 1915. It's
I didn't know that.
At least on Wikipedia, it's sort of unclear. People don't really know when it was made. But yeah, that is a real and is sort of like, again, according to Wikipedia, is sort of probably the earliest surviving like pornographic movie.
That we've talked about ones that are older than that, I think.
I mean, I think in the sense that this one is like the most hardcore, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I guess so.
In the technical sense.
Yeah.
Because I think the stuff that we had talked about was more sort of like erotica. It was like nudity and like dancing and things, whereas this is just like, okay, there they go.
Right. True.
Because I was wondering that watching the movie if that was an actual period correct film or not, and it is.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was wondering if like that was something that they made themselves in that style, but I guess not. Unless you have anything else to say about Pearl.
I did notice during the projection, the threading the projector bit, that it's like in 1918, I guess projectors were far enough along. Like the technology didn't really change until like the 2010s when they switched to digital projectors. Like the sort of two-reel system, and it threads through, and there's the light bulb behind it. I guess there's sort of like the external shutter. In this projector, which I thought was a cool little.
They were definitely using like an era appropriate projector, which you can source from places and still run and everything. But yeah, that was a really cool detail. I would we're at Denver Film. We're about to possibly get donated a 1910s projector. That I don't know if it
Ooh.
functions, but like it's just as like a decorative piece or something like that, and it'll be really cool to just kind of see how all the gears turn and everything like that.
Yeah. I am curious how much of like the underlying technology has actually changed, because it seems like
They keep
from
it
a sort
35
of
millimeters wide. They keep it.
yeah.
They keep the aspect ratio the same. Within the same frame at least.
Yeah.
At least until they add sound. There's a lot about projectors that have just been kind of refined into streamlined machines rather than changed too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So we move on to the next newer movie about old movies.
Yeah. What are you talking about? One that's 30 years old, or one that's like 50 years old, or 40?
The old one.
Okay.
Nickelodeon. Talking about Nickelodeon.
Yeah. A kind of like lesser known Peter Bogdanovich movie, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But still starring the fantastic pair of the O'Neills. What's her name? The kid. She's so good.
Is she in other Bogdanovich movies?
She is. Yeah. Have you seen Paper Moon?
I've not seen Paper Moon. So
she is amazing in that movie. So the main guy in this, God, I'm forgetting his name.
Ryan O'Neal.
So they've got Ryan O'Neal and Tatum O'Neal, and they're a father-daughter acting team, and they were in Paper Moon, which Bogdanovich made like 3 years earlier, and is an amazing movie. Like, it's a really great movie, like set in the 1930s about like a kind of con artist guy who has sort of this adoptive relationship with this little girl who they become like con artist buddies, basically.
Sold.
Yes. 1930s con artists. And this has that same pair as well as Burt Reynolds in this. And it's a movie about like film production in the 1910s.
Very, very relevant.
Yeah, very, very much relevant. I don't remember where, like, somebody told me like, oh, if you're doing this, you got to watch the movie Nickelodeon, or like this is something that you've got to pay attention to. And like, I think this and the next movie we're talking about, like, not a lot of people talk about these movies. They're definitely like under the radar in a lot of ways.
Yeah. What is the thing? Like it's reflective of the period of actual film history that it's like even the things about it are kind of lesser known.
Yeah, the only real stuff like that people make about this era is World War I pictures.
Yeah. Quick tangent. Did I tell you that I am very likely related to a con artist from the 1930s?
What?
Yeah.
This makes so much sense.
My great uncle or great uncle went to jail in 1940 for extortion in New York. It's in Sing Sing. And he had aliases. He went to jail many times throughout his life and under like different names. I don't really know much else besides that, but I would like to know more because that is a crazy story.
That's wild. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Is he still alive?
No.
Probably not.
He was a con artist in the 30s. He's not around anymore. But he worked for a director at some point in the 1930s also, which I think is kind of nuts.
Wow.
So he was at least tangentially involved in filmmaking also.
Well, speaking of people that are tangentially involved in filmmaking, like this is about like I love my segues, huh? This is about a lawyer who just kind of like happens his way into Hollywood, which I feel like is another kind of classic story.
Yeah. But I also think it wasn't even that uncommon at the time that like people from other trades or like jobs would just kind of like stumble into this new emerging industry and be like, I guess I'm doing this now.
It like wasn't enough of an industry that I think like people were, it was hard to break in, it's just like it could just happen.
It was a lot of like, hey, you there on the street, you want to be in a movie? Get over here.
So Ryan O'Neal plays the kind of main character. Oh, it's like Harrigan.
Harrigan. Although
He's
everyone keeps misremembering his names. They keep calling him
yeah.
Halloran or Hooligan or whatever.
There's a lot of very like screwball-y kind of comedy in this.
Yeah.
Bogdanovich had just made What's Up Doc, which I haven't seen, but it's got a lot of kind of like it's a mad, 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 mad world kind of comedy in it, as is my understanding, and I think there's some of that going on here, especially in the beginning of the movie. There's like some real life kind of Chaplin-esque, but Keaton-esque like slapstick gags.
Yeah. And even later on in the movie, there is a lot of, especially early, definitely, but yeah, there is a lot of 1910s era appropriate comedy.
Yeah. It's definitely like a loose movie in a lot of ways. It's
not super plotty.
Some people who get into making movies and then they try and make movies and stuff happens and there's some kind of interpersonal drama, and that's what it's about. But it was a fun old movie. What'd you think?
It was a fun movie. I have some criticisms of it. I didn't love it. It's very long. Not that in and of itself is a criticism, but it's like, I don't know. I have a lot more notes for this one, which always is usually a bad sign. Where if I'm taking a lot of notes during something, it's not good.
I think we can agree on what the worst thing about this movie is, which is that it worships D.W. Griffith.
Yeah, and it was almost the sort of thing where early on in the movie, I thought it was sort of building up to this sort of thing where like they realize that he's like a hack almost.
No, that's
but because like throughout the whole movie, he isn't a character in this. I think he appears very briefly at the end of the movie, just sort of like as a figure. But throughout it, people are being like, "Oh yeah, we're all trying to make movies, but like, oh, that Griffith guy, he's doing the real good ones."
Which it was. I feel like it was like the way that people talked about him at this time. That was like the understanding of him was like he had already been kind of canonized in film history, and all of these like 70s people were probably looking up to him as this groundbreaker.
Yeah. But I feel like it. I was sort of half expecting it to be building up to this sort of thing where they're like, we don't need him, or like some sort of cathartic thing of like breaking free of his shadow or something, and then it was at the end it's like, no, he's great. And I was like, well,
I watched Birth of a Nation and then didn't come away with mixed feelings, with intensely mixed feelings. I came away going, that was no one will ever make a better movie.
I think that is sort of somewhat a microcosm of a lot of my problems with this movie, is that it introduces a lot of the kind of inequities and sort of like uglier aspects of early filmmaking and doesn't really do anything with them. It just sort of like, oh yeah, also they were doing blackface, but like we're not going to unpack any of that. And it's just sort of like, well, all right. It's like, I get that this movie's trying to be a sort of very sort of light on its feet, fun comedy.
Right, but like why include blackface if you're trying to be light on your feet?
Right. And I mean, I guess the argument could be made that it's like, well, it was there, but we didn't want to like, bring down. It's like, I don't know. If you're going to make a movie about this time and like actually dig into like what it was like, I think, I don't know. There was that stuff I was not the biggest fan of. I'm just like, Peter, you gotta say something about this if you're going to put it in your movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like it doesn't even begin to sort of reckon with any of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if this movie like necessarily has a lot on its mind. Maybe, it's like an interpersonal love triangle-y kind of character drama, like wrapped around a comedy in just this kind of like very like loose 70s way. I suppose
it's very like set piece heavy. There's like really long stretches that are all built around sort of like a big stunt or a big sort of like comic set piece.
There is one scene that is like a really, really, really extended fight scene, like with fisticuffs.
Maybe my favorite part of the movie.
It made me think of when I watched They Live. I had not heard of Roddy Piper I didn't know that he was like a wrestling guy. I just thought
Mm-hmm.
this was the guy in front of me, right? And I'm watching They Live, and I'm like, how long is this fight scene gonna go on?
Maybe one of the best fight scenes in film is the They Live fight scene. It's yeah. I love
I was like, this feels so pointless. I don't understand what's happening here.
yeah. And like 3 times you're like, oh, it's done now, and then they keep going. It does feel kind of reminiscent of that. It also reminded me of I not that long ago watched another Ryan O'Neal vehicle, Barry Lyndon, the Stanley Kubrick movie. And both these movies have him sort of like picking a fist fight with someone and then being surprisingly good at beating them up.
I totally did not realize that was him. Wow.
Which I think might have just been a thing that Ryan O'Neal actually did. I don't know. I get the sense that he was a very sort of he's still alive, but I get the sense that he's I don't know, not the most well liked from people that worked with him.
Oh, really? Wow.
He might be a bit of a rascal himself. I do like this movie's overall, other than the fact that it introduces a lot of this sort of like ugliness of the time and doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
I do like a lot of its portrayal of early filmmaking in that it's like a bunch of ragtag people like in the middle of a desert just being like, I don't know what we're doing. I guess like do a thing in front of the camera and we'll get it.
We'll make it work somehow. Yeah, I like that.
Which I think still now, like that's how I felt making movies with you in like people's backyards when we were teenagers. And that's still kind of how I feel like making movies is with a bit more professionalism.
Right.
And I get the sense that that never really goes away. Like a lot of people who are far more successful and have done a lot more than I have said the same thing. Of just sort of like that sense of just sort of like controlled chaos is sort of somewhat integral to the very process of it. At least it kind of should be. That feeling never really quite goes away of just sort of like, I don't really know what we're doing, but we're making something here.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean that was fun. That was a fun aspect of it. Like the group of characters that we're following, they are and this is like really a really nice kind of period detail is that they are independent filmmakers who are being pursued by the people who own the patents to
the patent company,
the patent mob or whatever.
Those like, patent company bastards.
So there are like the big studios already at this point, and then there are people who are like trying to use projectors and film and or cameras and film on their own to make their own movies and distribute them by themselves outside of Edison's trust. And then they're these kind of recurring antagonists in the movie are these like strapped hitmen with who are trying to find these clandestine film shoots and then mess up the cameras.
Well, that's how Burt Reynolds' character gets introduced to the rest of the crew. Is he's sent by the patent company to shoot their camera, but he is kind of inept and doesn't really know how to shoot, so he misses. And then that leads to the extended fist fight with Ryan O'Neal. And then by the end of that, like, we're friends now. We just had a fist fight. And then like, let's make pictures. Cobb is the sort of the producer who's sort of fast talking, and he's the one who kind of gets everyone together, this ragtag group. He says a lot of lines like, where are my writers? Tell them how tough I am. And that kind of energy I think really pervades the whole thing and is a lot of fun. There's a great bit where Ryan O'Neal's character Harrigan gets sent out to California from Chicago to sort of help wrangle this film crew, and he gets there and he finds out the director has absconded with all the film and is just on a drunken bender somewhere, and we never find out what happens to him. And so then the camera guy, the director of photography as it were, is like, oh, you got to direct it now. And he's like, no. And he's like, oh, any jerk can direct. You just tell people where to stand. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Which is a great summation of my goals in life.
Would you say that anybody can direct? You just tell people where to stand?
I don't say anyone can direct, you just tell people where to stand, but I think it is, especially when you're actually on set, it is at times if everything is going well, it's usually just kind of sitting there and being like, good job, everyone. It's only really when like things are not going well that you're like, oh shit, I really have to get to work. I mean, and pre-production is a whole thing. That's like, you gotta do all the work then. There's a thing that I don't know if this is actually true or not, but it made me laugh where the crew says, oh, and at the end when they're explaining it to him what directing is, they're like, oh, you say action, and they do some stuff, and then you say cut, or D.W. Griffith says cease, and I just immediately thought, of course he fucking would. Cease.
I know.
Cease your actions.
This
is all very important and serious.
Yeah, like there's this thing, like D.W. Griffith is this kind of like I don't know, figure that is in the background of this movie of like these characters are always comparing themselves to the great D.W. Griffith. Or they get into trouble or something and they say, who are you? And it's like, oh, I'm D.W. Griffith,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like they want to make a movie as great as Griffith. They kind of like envy him. And so this director, he's like, the normal thing to do is to say cut, but when pretentious D.W. Griffith says cease, he says cut, cease,
Yeah. But see, that was the sort of thing where like early on they're doing that. I'm like, oh, okay, so this movie seemingly has some idea of like D.W. Griffith as this sort of like pretentious, maybe overly inflated figure. And then the ending of the movie, I feel like totally doesn't do anything with that. It's just sort of like, yeah, he is. He's great. And it's like, no, hang on.
I mean, the movie ends with this kind of screening of The Klansman.
Right, before they change the title.
Birth of a Nation. And everyone is just stunned. They're amazed. Their jaws are on the floor. They've never seen a better movie. And they say no one will ever make a better movie.
And it's, I guess, it's how much of that is what the characters are saying versus what the film is saying, or like the intent behind it.
Saying.
I kind of do too, and that's why I was like, ooh,
yeah.
Ooh. So yeah, not the best way to end the thing. There's also, I mean, like another thing that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, I guess, is there's the repeated direction that Harrigan gives, which is be natural, which I don't think you can necessarily fully. I don't think that Elise Guy came up with that phrase, but it was sort of like her famous directing phrase, right? Like she had it written on the wall of the studio, like that was her thing. It was like, be natural, be natural. And in this movie, throughout the whole thing, he's like, be natural, be natural. And it's like, they never once mention Elise Guy in this movie.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Wow. Yeah.
And so that was just like, oh, ugh, gross. There is reference to big hats, big women's hats.
During the D.W. Griffith movie, somebody sits down with a big hat, which is a good, good detail.
Even the idea of like a love triangle felt like a very 1910s, plot trope, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bit where they go to a Nickelodeon to see some movies, and they realize that it's their movies that they've been making that have been recut. Which is an actual thing that happened all the time. And so I like that thing of like they go to the movies just on a whim. And they're like, wait a minute, we made this, but like someone took it and recut it. Like, that's not right. And then they come out and they get mobbed by fans and who start ripping their clothes off and they have to run away.
Yeah, and like notably, like they're just a bunch of people who are just goofing around and getting paid in the desert, right?
Yeah.
And they haven't even realized that there's this like celebrity culture developing, where and they're kind of like they're shocked that all of these people are like trying to like steal someone's bow tie to prove that they saw them,
Yeah.
It's interesting, just like all of the like small details about the era of filmmaking, and a lot of this movie is based on testimony from a couple of people who were doing a lot of this stuff back in the day. They talked to Peter Bogdanovich, and a lot of what happens in this movie are based on the stories that they told him.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot of really great details of that. It's one of the few movies that I think does actually kind of portray this period of time in like pre-Hollywood filmmaking, kind of. They do the thing where they have like a bunch of sets all built in a row next to each other, and they're filming like 4 or 5 movies at the same time. Because it's silent, they can just roll cameras and have like 4 scenes happening simultaneously. That was a cool thing. That is like, I'd seen pictures of it and like read about it, but to kind of see it dramatized, I thought was pretty cool. That also shows up in Babylon, for a whole chunk of it. I was reading about the making of this movie, and it does kind of seem like everyone who worked on it didn't really have a great time and wasn't really happy with it. I don't necessarily know if that was because they didn't get along, but it was just sort of like, I think it seemingly sort of started out as a bit more of a straightforward sort of drama and got kind of more comedic and satirical as it went along. I think the original script wasn't nearly as comedic. I know that Peter Bogdanovich really wanted to shoot it in black and white because he felt like it needed to be for it to work, and so he was upset that it was in color. There's another cut of the movie that is in black and white that I guess it released after.
It's pretty hard to find the one DVD that has the director's cut. It has a couple minutes of extra footage, and the movie's in black and white. That DVD is like $90 and out of print. There were a couple of Bogdanovich like retrospectives that happened a few years ago where they played a DCP of the director's cut. But yeah, I don't really know what happened to it. Yeah. It's not easily accessible. At least it's not on Tubi.
It also is a cool portrayal of film exhibition where they show movies being screened and the projection room is full of smoke and people are shooting guns off behind the screen during
the
like
kind of
gunfight.
Orchestral Birth of a Nation premiere.
Yeah. Which is, that's a real thing that used to happen. I presumably with blanks, not bullets, but like that they would have like sound effects and things happening in the theater along with music. Like it wasn't just a guy at a piano or an organ. Like there was some movies had a whole production behind them of like to give it audio elements.
And also at the Nickelodeon where they saw their other movies, or where they saw at the Nickelodeon where they saw their kind of recut movie that they didn't agree to. One kind of interesting thing that I saw was that before the movie started, they had like a slideshow with lyrics where someone was playing the piano, and then they had like almost like a slide projector running. That went from one slide to the other. The whole audience would participate in the music and sing along, which was not something that I have seen depicted before. I'm always like curious, and I need to do more research into this, of like what a program looked like at a movie, at like a theater at this time. Like I know there were newsreels and there were shorts and there were features, and I know that oftentimes things looped. They would just play the same thing over and over again, so you'd sit down at any time and then just watch from there, and then it would catch back up again. But as far as the actual structure of it, I'm not like 100% sure. And this was an interesting like inclusion of that I'd never seen that before, but it kind of makes sense for the time, right? People are getting ready for the movie. They put a song on. They've got somebody playing music. They put a song on, you know?
Yeah.
It's a hymn for the cinema.
Overall, I enjoyed this movie. I think it's overall an entertaining kind of look at like this very scrappy like early period of filmmaking. But yeah, I didn't love it.
Yeah. I also didn't love Forgotten Silver.
Oh yeah? I like Forgotten Silver.
It was so this is the other movie, the third movie that we saw. It was directed by Peter Jackson and
Costa Botes?
So it's a fake documentary about a non-existent silent era film director from New Zealand. Peter Jackson directed the kind of like in-universe fake footage from this director, and then Peter Costa, you said?
Acosta boats or boatas. I'm not sure.
Peter Jackson, Costa Botas, yeah.
Yeah.
Directed the kind of like interview footage
Yeah.
that they spliced into this Talking Heads interview footage.
Costa Boats is another. He's primarily a documentary filmmaker, but he's also done narrative stuff. And yeah, they kind of split up those two sections of the movie. And I enjoyed this movie. I think it's very kind of silly and just like it doesn't necessarily amount to much, but it felt like an episode of Documentary Now to me, kind of.
I see. Yeah. Okay. I could dig that. I mean, like I feel like so this is credited as like a comedy mockumentary, at least online, you know, and like what it was more of a War of the Worlds style hoax where this was a TV movie. They played on TV. It's formally almost like the aesthetic of like the films that were put on in my anthropology classes in college. You know, things made by the BBC in the 90s or something like that. But it's about something that's completely fake. And I think that interestingly, it is not absurd enough that it's like completely obvious that it's fake. Like it's like somewhat absurd, right?
Yeah.
But like it's all like hypothetically believable. If somebody respectable is telling you this, you're like, oh, okay, you know, that checks out, right? And so it's this made up history, this made up biography of this guy, this New Zealander who actually like invented sync sound and invented color and filmed a flight, like a manned flight, before anyone else knew about it.
Yeah, it was like 2 months before the Wright brothers or something like that, and then all this footage had been lost, and that Peter Jackson had found it in like a basement somewhere.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I kind of left it thinking like I don't understand what the point is, and I didn't think it was like. I didn't think it was like funny enough to justify its existence. Maybe
I think even though it's all made up, you know, even though it's all fictional, I do think it's kind of a nice like summary of early film history in that it's sort of like, what if this other thing had happened? Like they do cover sort of like invention of sync sound and like film emulsion and like even sort of like hidden camera comedy stuff. Like they sort of have all these things, like he actually invented all this stuff like way before anyone else. But I think even though all that stuff is made up, it does end up being kind of two things that I thought I like got out of it, which were interesting, were even though it's all made up, it does still sort of act as a kind of interesting summary of early film history. The other thing is this idea that like at any point we can find an old moldy box full of film cans and they might completely change what we know about early film, because like so much stuff is lost and so much of what we know about this stuff is just based on what we have to look at about it. And the idea that like there could be a box of film sitting somewhere that is just this gold mine, this thing of just like completely changes our idea of history and of the art of thing, you know, it's like all this stuff.
It's grappling with the idea that so much of film history is lost, and it's using our understanding of that to trick people.
I don't really know how much I get that. It was sort of aired on TV as a sort of like this is like a real hidden thing, you know, but definitely knowing that it's fake, watching it, you're like, yeah, this is very silly.
It was played on TV in a segment that didn't usually play like fake things. They did plays, they did documentaries, and there were a lot of people who wrote into the TV station. Some of them were pleased with it. They thought it was entertaining, and some were kind of upset. There was a guy. Peter Jackson and Boats. They were. They had to go on TV the day afterwards and tell everyone that it was fake. Because
much like War of the Worlds, right?
Yeah. Someone wrote in and said, If, as claimed in your front page story of October 30, the Richard Pierce segment and much of the rest of Sunday night's TV1 documentary on the Colin Mackenzie film collection was a spoof, heads should roll in television New Zealand. There was no suggestion whatsoever that the film was not true. The viewing public... I'm going to stop doing this. The viewing public has been cruelly deceived. I'm a little too buzzed on
that good Coppola wine.
Francis Ford Coppola wine to do a proper New Zealand accent.
There's some kind of funny, like, foreshadowing, I guess, of later Peter Jackson things. I mean, just the idea of, like, early film history kind of shows up in King Kong. He does some kind of staged World War One footage, which
he loves World War One.
Yeah, he loves World War One. He made a whole actual documentary about it, which is really good.
Or maybe it's fake and we just haven't found out.
The actor Thomas Robbins, who plays Colin Mackenzie, who's this fictional New Zealand filmmaker, went on to appear as Smeagol's cousin Deagle in Return of the King, as well as he was also in King Kong and the Hobbit. And then Costa Boats shot a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff for Lord of the Rings.
It does seem like a relatively light thing that Peter Jackson made in between other, like, bigger projects. And they're definitely having, like, a lot of fun with this. They're being really tricky. They're in character in a way as, like, the version of Peter Jackson that is discovering all of this footage. And for 95, I think that they did a lot of good for like a 1995 TV movie. You know, I think they did, like, a lot of really good effects work to sell this old footage being what it was, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the fashion and the makeup and the acting of the time, in their kind of fake, era appropriate film clips, was really well done. And in particular, the degradation on the film was really well done. They had this kind of, like, fake, like, nitrate decomposition on their film that I thought looked really, really good.
Yeah.
And there were some, like, images that were, I don't know, like, how much they were, like, real or how much they were, like, Windows 95 photoshopped, you know? But, like, it looked quite good for, like, that era. And it was all this kind of, like, low-res, like, video, shot-on-video kind of thing. So it kind of blurred a little bit of the potential inadequacies in it.
Knowing what I know about Peter Jackson, I get the sense that he very likely shot all that footage on period cameras. Like, maybe even using, like, old film stock. And like degrading it, knowing how it gets degraded, like degrading it on purpose, but like knowing exactly how to do it properly so that it looks the same. And knowing that it's 95 and it's like probably not a lot of, you know, CG went into it. Like, it was a thing then, but it was very expensive, and like you couldn't necessarily do stuff just on your laptop at home like you can now. So yeah, they're like the craft of that stuff is pretty impeccable.
Yeah. I thought it was really well done, and it's a fun idea too. Like this, like inserting a fake guy into history, and then like going over all of the like big beats of silent film history. It almost felt kind of like post Forrest Gump. Is 1 year after Forrest Gump, you know?
I hadn't thought of that.
Another movie that, like, you know, put a fake guy into major historical events.
There's a bunch of kind of funny, like, interview segments with different people. Sam Neill is interviewed talking about, like, New Zealand film history. And it's like, oh, Sam Neill's saying it must be true. There is a very poorly aged interview with Harvey Weinstein praising D.W. Griffith, which is like a tesseract of terrible men in film history. It's just like, Jesus, this is just like, you know, it's all connecting in this one tiny thing. I'm just like, ugh, gross.
toward the end of the movie, something I thought was interesting with the Weinstein stuff is that
he makes a joke about recutting people's movies, which is like
yeah,
what everyone hated him, one of the many things people hated him for.
the
But
thing that
like,
people knew to hate him for then was that he
right.
was this guy that like sliced up other people's movies
Yeah.
and like bastardized them. And yeah, like Weinstein going like, "Oh yeah, I think he would like that we took his 3-hour movie and cut it down to 1 hour. It's much better
Yeah.
now."
And it's like, oh my, yeah. That genuinely actually kind of made me angry. That it's like, shut up.
I mean, I
We
don't know
hate
if
you for
maybe like,
doing this and other worse things.
if like the writers had him say that as like a jab at him, or if
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein actually like said that for
Yeah.
of his own accord.
That would also be funny if they like gave him like copy to write and he was just like, okay, and like did not realize that he is telling on himself there. Yeah, I think it's funny that for our last decade in review thing, we watched an actual documentary and like a narrative film, and for this one, like, no, we're just gonna watch a fake documentary.
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there is something, but I'm not aware of any kind of like major documentaries about this era specifically.
Yeah, I'm sure they exist, but yeah, I'm also not aware of any. So hit us up in the comments.
The comments down below on the YouTube.
Yeah, rate and review, and in your review, tell us where to find documentaries about the 1910s.
I guess like the last stuff that I'll say about this is like, as we kind of touched on earlier, a lot of the like little details about early film I think are done really, really well here.
Mm-hmm.
There are the fake director Colin McKenzie is making a biblical epic, and I think like you can see it as a parallel to Intolerance and the Babylon from Intolerance, or at least just other like Italian epics of the time.
Yeah.
I thought that the acting really like mimicked silent film acting in a really good way. And just all these like really tiny details that came from a lot of research for sure and a lot of knowledge.
Yeah. And a lot of love too, I think. It's like to skewer something this accurately, I feel like you have to really like enjoy it, you know what I mean? Like you can tell that Peter Jackson loves this stuff to be able to put this much detail into it. That's always something I like about whenever I see a sort of a satire of something that is coming from a place not of anger, but of just like, I love this thing, I want to make fun of it now.
Well,
should we get to our
top 10 of the decade?
Our top 10s? Oh, I'm very excited to do our top 10s. I don't know why. I'm just very intrigued to see like what the differences between them are. And to just, run back down memory lane.
Yeah. Because we have encountered such a long break, a lot of this stuff is a little distant from me.
Same.
And so I picked my list mostly out of things that made like a lasting impression on me. But I think even though there's some stuff that I might have missed, I think that I can vouch heavily for all of the stuff on this list.
I have a couple honorable mentions that I have written down. I don't know if we want to go through those or not. Those don't actually count. So
I don't know. Sure, if you want.
So the ones that I feel like deserve some sort of mention, but did not make my list are J'accuse, which I feel like was just very technically accomplished. I know you did not care for J'accuse. I was impressed with the staging of that movie, and sort of even though some of it, as we pointed out in that episode, is kind of janky also. Parson Sue, which I'm very upset is missing, I think, like the whole third act, because I thought that movie was a lot of fun. Terry Vegan, I quite enjoyed.
It's a good one.
And A Dog's Life, which is probably my favorite of the like Chaplin films that we've seen so far. A lot of credit goes to the dog in that one. I mean, the dog is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Like, you put a cute dog in a movie, and it's it's just cheating at that point.
Glenn's favorite movie of all time is Air Buddies, the one where they go to space.
Oh, I haven't seen it. I have to now. That sounds great.
It's something like 9 little dogs who are Airbud's children, and they go to
Oh,
space.
incredible. I do like how they're accurately being like, well, if a dog has children, there's going to be 9 of them.
Our top tens, counting down from number 10. I'm gonna throw my 10 out there because I know this is gonna be higher on your list, and we can get to it later. Ghost of Slumber Mountain.
Not on my list.
Not on your list.
Wow, yeah.
I felt
I'm kind of surprised that it isn't on my list now, looking at everything. I didn't even give it an honorable mention. Look at that. How dare
I felt like I needed to get one of these O'Brien movies on here. There are a lot of pulpy fun. This one's got some fun dinosaurs. It's got some fun phrases that should not that have aged very poorly, I suppose, not in a racist way but in a funny way. And I think that there's like a way that some people will like read things a lot of the time where if somebody's got some kind of like I don't know, sexual hang up, a lot of the times like it'll come out in their work. I don't know if that's true or not, you know, but like Ender's Game, very gay, and this guy hates gay people, right?
There you go.
Ghost of Slumber Mountain, very gay. And I don't know what's going on with that, but I enjoy it.
Yeah. I guess the actual, other than the dinosaur effects, which are incredible for the time, like it's still just like the fact that Willis O'Brien was so he didn't invent stop motion, but he really sort of like perfected a specific style of stop motion that became like the go-to way of doing effects for many years.
Yeah, I mean, like Harryhausen follows in that.
Yeah, I mean Harryhausen learned it from Willis O'Brien, like directly.
I didn't know
that. So that aspect of it, I think, is really impressive and really cool. I think the rest of the movie, other than being like entertaining, I feel like as a whole, as a film, I didn't think that Beast of Slumber Mountain was like one of the best films that we watched. Even though it has this thing in it that is like really super cool.
I think it's a lot of fun.
That's me retroactively justifying why it's not on my list.
I think I'm gonna have to constantly justify that, like, a lot of this is a little old to me, and so I'm probably missing stuff that's important, and maybe there are better movies than this. But I think this one's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What's your top 10? What's your 10?
My number 10 was Cabiria, one of the Italian epics. Probably the best one we watched. It's visually very impressive. It's not nearly as boring as a lot of the other ones that we watched.
The hype for Quo Vadis, I don't understand.
Oh boy, don't even. Quo Vadis was rough. Cabiria is like full of action and wild stunts and like crazy sets. That's the one with the giant temple. Both interior and exterior, the set for that is stunning. Like to modern eyes, I'm still like, I can't believe someone built this. This is insane.
It's like the Babylon sequences of Intolerance, which were directly modeled after Cabiria. Yeah. Plus, it's got like a little Conan the Barbarian in there.
Yeah. It's got a lot of like just people, sword and sandals, fighting, and yeah. I mean, I feel like this. Hopefully, my list isn't just like, well, from a technical perspective, I thought it was very impressive, but yeah, no, Cabiria, I thought worked on that, on the level of just being like, what a picture! Look at this thing.
Nice.
Movies have the power to change the world. And it is also one of those things, where like Intolerance gets so much praise and credit for. Intolerance is very impressive to look at. I mean, good golly, the sets in that.
It's ridiculous.
Like, Cabiria is like just the good parts of Intolerance. You know, it's like without any of the just overly dramatic stuff. It's like Kabiri is super operatic and dramatic, but it's in a way that feels appropriate. It doesn't feel like, all right,
Yeah.
dude, shut up.
I agree. Yeah, that was a good one, and I would also agree that it's probably my favorite of the Italian epics that we saw.
Yeah. All right. Number 9.
My number 9 was The Cheat.
The Cheat.
Which I was
Also
the
not
first,
on my list.
The first oh god, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. I've had too much Coppola wine. Cecil B. DeMille.
Yes.
It was the first Cecil B. DeMille movie that we watched, and also I think my favorite that we watched. This is a really, really well told, kind of pulpy, kind of lurid and dramatic story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was really surprised by it. It felt the drama felt and the storytelling felt really ahead of their time, I think.
Yeah.
I honestly, it came out the same year as Birth of a Nation, and all the praise gets heaped on that movie. But I think that for movies that came out in 1915, The Cheat feels more casually modern than Birth of a Nation.
It feels more mature in the sense of thoughtfulness, and not the sense of boobies and violence. It's that's what Birth of a Nation is there for.
Yeah.
I feel like The Cheat is a bit more of a sort of certainly more restrained, but also I think a kind of smarter, not bigger kind
Yeah,
of.
but I would. It's restrained, in a certain way. But I think it's also a
It's
bit of
restrained for
pulpy
1915.
fun, you
Yeah,
know.
it is also very pulpy. It's true. And fairly lurid.
But yeah, I quite enjoyed that. There were some amazing shots in that movie. Really cool compositions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. What's your
Yeah.
number 9?
My number 9 is The Doll. The Ernst Lubitsch weird, horny robot movie.
I have not been able to stop telling people about this movie
It's
because
super fun. It's and it's fun to talk about too, just because it's a wild movie.
yeah, I'm telling people I'm watching silent films and I'm watching a movie. I saw a movie about a guy who is so powerfully gay that he has to fake marry a sex robot so that he can get his inheritance.
Yeah, and then a bunch of other weird stuff is also in the movie.
Yeah.
Apart from that, there's the weird boy assistant who tries to kill himself over and over again. There's all the sort of goofy visual things of the horse costume and the winky moon, and there's a lot of good slapstick, a lot of great silent movie acting, of just funny facial expressions and things like that. I think it's a good example of the types of silent film that you get when you don't just focus on early Hollywood or early American movies.
There's some silly stuff going on in Germany at the time.
Oh yeah, they needed to get their mind off of some things, like a war ending. And yeah, I thought that was also interesting too, of looking at the movies being made in Germany and in France during the time, and it's a lot of the German movies are we're not going to talk about the war that we're currently in, whereas I feel all of the French movies no, we need to talk about the war though. Yeah, fun movie, recommend it.
I love it. 8 for me. I wanted to include some shorts on here, not just focus too much on features, and
Right.
I put number 8 for Sinking of the Lusitania,
Some animation,
which was some of the most lavish animation that I've ever seen. They spent a year and a half on this I don't know what, 8-minute movie or something like that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it shows.
It's a really somber, adult, dramatic, animated, quote unquote documentary. It's a propaganda piece. It's jingoistic in certain ways, but the way that it shows human suffering, the way that it shows the kind of very realistically rendered details of this or not a battleship, a
Yeah.
passenger
Very
Titanic
notably
style.
not a battleship.
Yeah, this passenger Titanic style ship being like exploded, and lifeboats coming down and people jumping off the edges. Yeah, it's some of the most amazing animation that I've ever seen, and it's
Mm.
definitely like the most amazing animation that we've seen so far.
Yeah. And it's the thing too where I think it's animated on ones, as they say, like no frames are repeated. It's like every frame of the animation is a frame that is unique.
Yeah.
And so that too is the thing that sort of like the streamlining of animation, like we don't need to animate this every frame, and I think this is before I either they figured that out, or maybe Winsor McKay was also just too much of an overachiever to not do that.
Yeah.
Watching it is a bit sort of like, all right, like the propaganda aspect of it is very, very, very heavy handed. I think at the end there's just like a big title card that's like, and they tell us not to hate the Germans or something like that. And it's like, all right.
Yeah.
Bring it down a little bit. But it's old timey, but also it's like, yeah, a war had just started and there was this very real tragedy that had just happened. And so I think it is reflective of how people were feeling at the start of World War One, for sure.
I'm less about the jingoism and more and hawkishness, and more about just
Yeah.
like the impressive animation. But yes.
I feel like that goes with a lot of movies from this time, though. It's like the movie is some of its morals a little bit questionable, but you know what? Like, it was fun. My number 8 is Straight Shooting, the John Ford's first film. Not just Earliest Surviving, but like his first feature film. And it's wild to see someone kind of from the get. It's like, yeah, he had it. Like, good at making westerns, right off the bat.
He's
like
the Western guy.
Yeah. Real good at it, it turns out. Even the first time going at it. I think we mentioned on that episode how he was only given money and film, I think, to make about half of the movie he wanted to. And he lied and said that he filmed half of it and then lied and said that his film fell in the river and he did more to redo what he'd just done. But then he just shot the rest of the movie anyway. Which is
Chad
great.
move.
Yeah, it's a great story of the kind of like the weird scrappy con artistry of like early film.
Yeah.
That I still also feel like is still an element in filmmaking now, of just sort of like just sneak into the building and like when no one's looking and film the thing like that. I don't condone breaking any laws to get your movie made. I don't think that is the way to go about it.
I do.
I like how filmmaking still has this kind of I don't know, this scrappy nature to it. I keep saying scrappy, but I can't think of a better adjective for it.
Scooby.
There you go. Of just grabbing what you can and sort of making the best thing you can with what's available, and sort of maybe being a little sneaky about it too. But I don't know. It's a Western. I don't know it's such a quintessential Western. Right off the bat, like it's a sort of thing. I didn't expect it to be nearly as fully formed of a sort of like example of the genre as it is, because I feel like it's not by no means the first Western, but it is definitely one where it's really starting to kind of crystallize a lot of the iconography and a lot of the kind of story beats that we expect from a Western, of like the lone gunman who sort of like comes in to like help a family who's in trouble, and like coming into a saloon with the swingy doors, and like things that are just like very classic Western things.
Yeah.
John Ford was like, that we're doing that. Which is why he's like, the grandpappy of the genre, basically.
Until the Italians started messing with it.
Without all those pasta westerns.
All those rigatoni westerns.
Those tortellini westerns.
Those bow tie westerns.
All right, number 7.
My number 7. I hope that this is kosher, because I'm lumping an entire cereal in together, and I'm gonna put Vampires, Les Vampires,
Okay.
as my number 7.
I also consider that's also on my list, and it is. I also put it as a. I didn't separate it into separate segments. It's like it's a singular thing, even though it's 10 hours long.
Les Vampires from Louis Fouillade is his original work, and I think that it's. I have another one of his movies a little higher up because I liked it better than Les Vampires. But I still think that this is a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool imagery in it. The storytelling in this kind of serialized way is a lot of fun. And it's iconic. It's Les Vampires.
Yeah.
It's crime drama, edge of society, rogue reporter. You gotta love it.
Yeah. It is very pulpy in like the purest sense of what pulp is.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me so much of Batman and Tintin and like old adventure stories and old crime noir stories and things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the vampires. It's great. And the vampires is definitely something that I would recommend to people if they're like, I want to watch more like silent movies.
Yeah. Go beyond Chaplin.
Right, because yeah, like the vampires is not that at all. It's not a slap. There is slapstick in it. I mean, Mazamet is a great slapstick character.
He's a goofy guy.
And Mazamet's son, Eustache. But yeah, there's a lot to like about this one for sure.
Yeah. What's your number 7?
My number 7 is, you're gonna laugh at me, is The Detective's Dog. Which it's also like a detective story, naturally.
Yeah.
It's like a crime, but then he has a dog that has to save him in the end. You may notice I'm going real hard on the dog stuff because I like dogs, but this was just such a delightful thing that I guess I deemed it as a number 7 worthy thing. I mean, it's got the dog, which of course is doing a lot of heavy lifting. But was it does feel kind of like a proto Lassie thing of like the dog's got to save the people now.
I've heard of Mango Lassie, but Proto Lassie.
Oh boy, even I'm struggling to justify how high on my ranking this is.
That's fine. That's fine.
It's a fun movie, okay?
We can have fun.
Detective, he gets captured. His dog has to come save him. I loved it.
I need to give that one another watch. I remember that being a lot of fun.
Number 6.
My number 6 is Suspense.
Spoilers.
Lois Weber.
Same ranking.
Oh, we're going to talk about our 6s.
My number 6 is also Suspense.
Nice.
So let's get into it.
Amazing film from Lois Weber. Such adventurous camera work. A really good sense of tension that she established in this movie. Fantastic. Really, like groundbreaking film, honestly.
Yeah, and it felt very confidently made. You know, it felt like there was really intent behind all the decisions, all the very bold decisions that she made making this movie. It's the best example, I think, of a silent film genre that I don't love, which is creepy guy breaks into a house while a woman is afraid. But I think this is like the pinnacle of that sort of very small subgenre of silent film. I think I did not see a better one than this.
No. Yeah.
She had real genuine tension and, dare I say it, suspense. Well titled, you know? Back then they were like, what do we call this movie? What is it? Suspenseful? Just call it Suspense. No one's done that before.
Lois Weber is it's really impressive, a really impressive filmmaker, and we will be talking about her again. My number 5 is, which we already talked about, is The Doll. I thought that I should put one Lubitsch movie on here, and I wasn't sure about I Don't Want to Be a Man versus The Doll, but The Doll is like, it's so hooky, you know?
Yeah.
Being able to just say like, yeah, talk about the things that literally happen in this movie
Yeah.
is worth is worth, yeah, it's great to tell people about all that stuff.
Yeah. I love like the kind of fantastical elements of it too, where it does take place in a very heightened kind of like storybook reality. And like the visuals of it are very heightened. The performances are very heightened. But like it all feels of a piece. It all sort of creates this reality that is very playful and fun.
Yeah. What's your number 5?
My number 5 was The Pirates of 1920, which again is one that this one was just pushing all my buttons. You know, it's about sky pirates who have an airship, and they're like
Captain Sky.
They're trying to shoot down the airships because the pirates are like stealing boats out of the ocean. It's great. It's like big, kind of like James Bond, like action adventure sci-fi stuff. I think that movie was made, I forget what year. I think it was like 1912, 1913. But it's set in 1920. And it's like in the 1920s, the cops will have little hook arms that come out of balloons and grab people. And I'm like, you know what? Back then, I'm sure that seemed very plausible.
Technology is just moving so fast, you know?
Yeah.
We're going to all be riding around in Zeppelins. And
I do love the idea that it's never going to happen, because I think at this point it's just not a thing. But everyone's like, in the future, we're all going to be flying around. And it's just like, no, we're not. Like, flying is too much trouble. I mean, we have airplanes, right? We travel.
We do airplanes. There are a lot of great Sky Pirate movies. And
Sky Pirates, love them. Anyway, number 4.
So I'm going a little goofy for this one again, but this one is one that, again, like, it's hard to not talk about, which is For His Son.
For His Son, yeah, that one is not an intentional comedy.
The only D.W. Griffith, the only way that D.W. Griffith's going to be anywhere close to notable on my list, that I'm gonna care about anything that he's done, is this hilarious movie that he made.
His anti-cocaine movie.
Yeah, his hilarious anti-soda, anti-cocaine movie.
Yeah, specifically soda, which is my favorite thing about this movie, is that his son gets addicted to cocaine through soda, which, I mean, it was in Coca-Cola.
But this was like already outdated by the time that it came out.
That, which makes it even funnier that it was like, DW, they don't do that anymore. They quickly realized that this was not a good thing.
Classic misinformed reactionary D.W. Griffith.
Exactly. Yeah, this movie's hilarious because it's D.W. Griffith being still just as dramatic and sort of like heavy in his sort of like, this is very serious business. This is high drama.
Yeah.
And it's like, my son drank too much soda.
Have you seen that clip of some meme clip of Trump going like, Obama, and then Biden goes, soda.
Obama, soda. No.
It's very abstract, but it's an enjoyable thing it's an enjoyable meme. Is
it a Vic Berger creation?
It's that kind of deal. Yeah.
I've been watching a bunch of Vic Berger stuff lately, and it is both nightmarish and also very, very funny.
That's his aesthetic for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie's very funny. Good pick. I approve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I had forgotten about that movie, and you reminded me of it, and it brought me a lot of joy. My number 4 was The Trust, or The Battles for Money, which is a movie that I think we both agreed deserves to be remade. Who knows? Maybe I'll do that someday. But this was a surprisingly like really well plotted little crime movie. I don't know if it was technically a feature. I don't think it was. I think it was about 20-something minutes long, if I'm remembering correctly from months and months ago. But it's got a secret hideout underneath a cliff mansion.
People
It's got
wearing
it's got
masks.
invisible ink, people wearing masks. It's got like car chases. It's like it's a really fun, exciting crime movie. That also feels very I guess kind of couched in the time period it was made. It's about like robber barons, and this guy discovers the sort of the chemical formula for synthetic rubber, and but the the rubber magnates are like, well, we can't have this, and so they're trying to like steal it and get the guy killed, and they're sending assassins and like private eye after him, and then the private eye turns on him and helps them get away with it. It's great. Spoilers, but it's great.
That's a fun one. Yeah, that's a good one. My number 3 is Fantomas. Louis Fouillade directed this. He didn't write it, and I think that because he based it on some novels, I think that it's a little tighter than Vampires, and I think this is a lot of fun. There's a lot of... This one is following the villain rather than following a kind of, I don't know, dopey journalist, as in Vampires. And there's some real good tension in this movie. It's got a lot of really fun Mission Impossible like disguises.
The disguises are great.
The thing, I mean, honestly, the thing that in Fantomas that sticks with me the most is the guy who was stuck,
the bell tower.
The guy who's stuck inside on the ringer of a bell, of a church bell, holding a sack of jewels but can't get down. They ring the church bell, and then blood and jewels rain down from the church bell. It's
during
amazing.
The church service.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's so salacious. It's so iconic. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Fantomas.
Fantomas. Incredible. My number 3 is The Conquest of the Pole.
Mm-hmm.
The not his last, I don't think, but the final one that we watched of Georges Méliès. And very impressive. Like, it has a lot of great Méliès stuff. Méliès was kind of out of the game fairly early in the 1910s. But this was one of his last movies, and it's a good one. It's got the ice giant, which is this giant like practical effect of like a big head and a big arm that comes out of the ground. All just like life, big sets that sort of like move around and grab people and things like that.
It's kind of Méliès at his like apex in a way.
It is, yeah. I think the two movies he made earlier, I think, are a bit better. I think Trip to the Moon and Kingdom of the Fairies are probably the top 2 for me. Mm-hmm. But Conquest of the Pole is really impressive and a lot of fun and super. It has all of the elements that people like about Méliès's movies, of like just the kind of anything goes attitude of just like, no, there's an ice giant, and now they're in the North Pole. I'm like, don't worry about it. And yeah, just the sets are gorgeous. There's an infectious sense of just like abundance of imagination, and it's just like, oh, this is incredible. Like, look at what we can do.
Yeah.
So it was,
especially with that ice giant, there's like a lot of budget being put into that,
Yeah. The ice giant is just great to look at.
My number 2. Getting close to the end here. My number 2 is Falling Leaves. It is superb Alice Guy-Blache film.
Arguably maybe her most famous movie?
I don't know. Yeah, in a way, maybe.
Yeah.
It is... I was just stunned by how much this can, like, jerk the tears in 12 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a movie about a little child who doesn't understand how doesn't understand the world fully yet, but knows that her sister is dying. Overhears the doctor, because it's becoming fall. This doctor saying by the time the last leaf falls, then her sister will be dead. And so this adorable little child starts like gluing and taping the leaves back on the trees so that her sister will stay alive. It's very saccharine, it's very sad, but it's very good. It's really well done.
It is really well done. Yeah, like I feel like describing that story, it can maybe sound overly like saccharine or silly, but it's like it really plays well, I think. And it's very artful. It's very poetic. It's like it is a great example of drama done through silent film. Of like you don't need a lot of trappings, I guess. Like it's like you said, it's very short. It gets in, it gets out, but it's like it does a lot of emotional heavy lifting with that time.
I mean, I think that this is another one that you can show to people who, have not seen much silent film, and you can you can show them a Keaton movie and they'll laugh and they'll think it's fun, but you can show them this and they'll be like, "Damn,"
Damn, son. Yeah.
Where'd you find this?
Yeah, I'm again, like I'm like that should have been on my list, but it didn't.
Tell us about your number 2s, Glenn.
My number 2 is The Vampires.
Les Vampires?
Les Vampires. Oui. I love the Vampires. It's super fun. I think I guess this is kind of giving away what my number 1 is. I think I do think Fantomas is slightly better for the reasons you stated. Like it feels, the writing in it is a lot tighter. And like you say, it's like we're kind of following maybe a bit more competent characters a lot of the time. I think the characters in The Vampires are a little bit more bumbling. But that's also kind of the fun of it. I think I actually like how chaotic this movie feels, and how the villain changes like every 3 episodes or every 3 segments, like because they would like kill a character off, or the actor would have to leave to go fight in World War One, and they were like, "Oh, we need a new guy. Satanus, you get in here." Satanus, whatever you say it. And there's a lot of. It does kind of feel like just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, but a lot of it sticks, and there's an energy to that where it's just like ideas coming out of the ether and be like, "Oh, let's do this now. Let's go train chase now." That I really liked, and Irma Vep is a great character.
The kind of consistent member of the Vampires.
The most consistent villain through the whole thing, and even I like the bumbling detective who feels like he was written as a boy detective but is played by an adult man. But is solving crimes in his jams and getting knocked unconscious and thrown into a laundry basket, I think once per episode.
And
great fun.
A little preview: our next episode is going to be discussing the Oliver Assayas movie Irma Vep, his new Irma Vep HBO series, and we'll be talking over The Vampires again a little bit too.
Yeah, naturally.
So look forward to that, and then we'll get to 1920 finally.
Yeah. So my number 1 is Fantomas. Your number 1 is.
Oh, do you have anything else to say about Fantomas?
About Fantomas? I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, we've already talked about it, but yeah, it does feel, it has all of the a lot of the wacky stuff from Les Vampires. I mean, it was made before, and it's Louis Feuillade, sort of. I think he'd already made crime films before this, but this is definitely him being like, all right, I can really expand this out to being a big sweeping thing with lots of twists and great set pieces. There's like a whole bit where one of the detectives seemingly dies and then comes back later, and you're like, oh, he was alive the whole time. It's like there's stuff that genuinely got me really pumped and excited.
Very early serialized storytelling too.
Yeah, really peak TV is what Fantomas is.
It's kind of the golden era of television.
Yeah.
It's 1913.
Yeah, good. Just like really well made. The guy who plays Fantomas has such a great face. And then has like 3 disguises every episode also, which is awesome. It's just like, just cool shit happens in both of these so much that of course they're my two favorite things that we watched. Like, the Louis Feuillade crime serial is just untouchable to me.
We'll have to watch Judex
Judex, yeah.
at some point. Maybe just on our own time. My number one is Hypocrites.
Oh,
I thought that movie was fantastic. I think we kind of like focused in on Hypocrites for a second because it's Lois Weber, who we already kind of respected. But I think the like kind of flashy thing to know about Hypocrites is that, you know, it's the first movie with like full frontal nudity in it, and it was like a whole big deal. She had to talk about how she's Catholic and stuff and that the movie was an art piece to allow people to even watch it. But that's not even the main thing of it. Like, I think like that, you know, it's the headline grabbing aspect of Hypocrites. But Hypocrites is one of the most I don't know, it's one of the most like intellectually stimulating movies that we have seen the entire time. It like that movie has stuff on its mind and it is using filmic language to talk about it. It is I think that there's so much going on in Hypocrites. It's got so much to say about the state of religion, about the state of what it is to be a good person, about the state of about like the idea of martyrdom. It is a really complex and fascinating movie, and it's artful. It's like an art film.
yeah.
And I think it's extremely well done. And I when I think about what is like a movie from this era that is art, like I'm thinking of Hypocrites.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the nudity in it is not done to be like titillating. It's just like, no, it's like people are naked sometimes. Like it's done for very like the right reasons, you know?
Yeah.
That makes it also just kind of more annoying that people were like, oh, this can't be shown to people in the Nickelodeons. I quite liked Hypocrites. I agree that it feels like a movie with a lot on its mind and is really thoughtful about how it's putting that into images and how it's pulling a story out of these different ideas. My overall opinion, I guess, of Lois Weber was took a bit of a hit when I found out that she was into eugenics, and made a whole movie about that. And so I was like, oh, Lois, I had so much respect for you. But Suspense and Hypocrites are both just really impressive things where you're like, oh, this person has a very good sense of just how to put images together in a very thoughtful, artistic way.
Lois Weber and Louis Feuillade, keeping our 19-aughts people as our tops of 19. Was Lois Weber around in the 19-aughts? I don't remember.
Not really. I don't think.
I guess not.
But yeah, Feuillade has been around for a minute.
I was trying to sum it up all nice, and then I donked it up.
Yeah, I mean, we got this decade. We got, you know, the last Méliès movies. We got the oldest surviving Elise Guy-Blache movies. So it's like it does kind of feel like, to some degree, in the end of like the first era almost of filmmaking.
For sure, yeah. And now we're moving into the kind of golden era, the kind of famous era of silent film.
Yeah.
We're going to be starting off with, you know, Caligari and The Golem. And like these are really, you know, I think in 1919 I was really seeing just like the inklings of this really like formalized film style, everything being really streamlined in the way that you kind of expect 1920s movies to be. And so I'm looking forward to a lot of that stuff.
I'm super excited to be getting to the 20s. Because it's like I've seen a couple of 20s movies. Like I've seen Caligari, I've seen Nosferatu, I've seen Metropolis, like a couple others, but that's about it. Like I've seen a couple of the really famous ones, and that's it. And so to be able to really go through and kind of see stuff develop like this is gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Also, just a Caligari fun movie.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Haven't seen Golem yet, but
Same.
it's another German expressionist movie.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we saw even
we're
like
familiar with the director.
the first sort of like slight inklings towards that in the 1910s of like German films kind of being a bit more playful with reality and with set design and with the just overall sense of I guess expression than a lot of the French or American films that we watched.
Indeed.
So got
there's
a lot to look forward to.
Yes, those are the words that I was going to say. Yeah. Anything else to talk about in our summary of the
I don't know.
The 1910s?
It's been fun. I really feel like I learned a lot, both about like filmmaking and film history, but like history in general,
and about myself. I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah, I really enjoy doing this. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And I'm glad to get back into it. Now that you know we it's possible again.
Now that we can dedicate however many hours a week to just watching old stuff.
We're doing it for you, viewers.
That's right. Be grateful.
No, we're having a lot of fun, and I'm excited to get into the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s, not so much the 50s or 60s.
Hey, there's some good stuff in there.
Then maybe the 70s, not the 80s, maybe the 90s.
Not the 80s. But what about Back to the Future? What about Roger Rabbit though?
I'm just saying things. Nothing that I say means anything. As I'll take a final sip of my Francis Ford Coppola wine. Glenn, I'll see you next year, and by next year I mean when we talk about Les Vampires and Irma Vep in the next episode.
Yes, I'll see you in. There's no good waves. I'll see you in the next episode.